Sometimes you get instructions, just do it this way, and something in you tightens. Not rebellion, instability. You can follow the steps, you're capable, you understand the sequence, but without the reason behind it, it feels like stacking bricks on air. You move, but you don't trust the movement. You comply, but something remains unanchored. And when you ask, why are we doing it this way? Sometimes you get the look, the subtle irritation. Does it matter? Just follow the process. Yes, it matters. Not because you need control, because you need structure. 1. You don't process actions, you process systems. Most people treat instructions as isolated tasks. Step 1, Step 2, Step 3. You don't. The moment you hear a directive, your brain asks, what is the outcome? What principle governs this? What constraint are we optimizing for? You're not trying to complicate it. You're trying to locate the framework, because without the framework, steps feel arbitrary, and arbitrary steps feel fragile. You don't like fragile. 2. Missing context creates cognitive instability. When someone says, just trust the process, your mind doesn't relax. It searches. What process? Designed by who? Under what assumptions? Does it still apply here? If the reasoning isn't visible, your brain keeps scanning for it. Not to challenge authority, to prevent structural collapse. Because if you don't understand the logic behind an action, you can't adapt when variables change, and variables always change. Some people execute first and understand later. You struggle to execute without understanding first, and that difference shapes everything. If you're capable of following directions, why does it feel almost physically uncomfortable not to know the why? 3. You think in load-bearing principles. Here's what's happening underneath. You don't memorize rules. You extract governing laws. Instead of do X in this situation, you want, in this type of system, X works because of Y. Once you have Y, you can generate X on your own. That's power. That's stability. That's independence. Without the principle, you're dependent on instruction. With the principle, you're adaptive, and your brain prefers adaptation over obedience. 4. Execution without framework feels risky. You're not resistant, you're calculating. If I follow this without understanding it, what happens when something shifts? What if the context changes? What if this advice only works under specific conditions? You don't want to build habits on assumptions. You want load-bearing clarity. So when someone skips the explanation, you don't feel defiant. You feel ungrounded. An ungrounded action feels dangerous to your cognition. You're not slowing things down. You're making sure they don't break later. 5. You reverse engineer authority. This is the part people don't always notice. When someone confident gives instructions, others relax. You analyze. What model are they using? Is it coherent? Does it generalize? Is it outdated? You don't automatically distrust authority. You contextualize it, because competence to you isn't volume, it's internal consistency. Most people follow instructions. You test the architecture behind them quietly, sometimes invisibly. 6. You learn differently than most. Surface learners store steps. You store structures. If someone teaches you a tactic without the theory, you forget it. But if they teach you the theory, you can recreate the tactic years later because you didn't memorize the move. You understood the mechanics. That's why shallow explanations frustrate you. Not because they're wrong, because they're incomplete. You don't want answers. You want models. So what happens when you're forced to act without full clarity? Do you stall, or do you comply and feel the instability later? 7. Your resistance is actually risk management. When you hesitate, it's rarely about effort. It's about foundation. You don't want to invest energy into something that doesn't structurally make sense. You don't want to commit to a direction that collapses under pressure. So you ask questions. You refine definitions. You test assumptions. To some, that looks difficult. To you, it's preventative maintenance, because once the framework locks in, you move fast, decisively, confidently, clarity first, then acceleration. 8. You don't need more instructions. You need first principles. Slow this down. You are frame dependent, not dependent on authority, dependent on coherence.
You don't execute comfortably inside disconnected steps. You execute powerfully inside understood systems. Some people are comfortable following directions. You reverse engineer the system before you move. And once you understand the architecture, you don't just follow it, you improve it. The real question isn't, can't I just do what I'm told? It's this: how many times has your need for the why saved you from building something that would have collapsed anyway? And what would happen if you stopped apologizing for needing the foundation before the blueprint?